Exactly 1 year ago, we got our first extended look at Starfield. And if you remember, the big conversation was, wow, this looks a lot like No Man's Sky, the performance isn't great, but also this is still a Bethesda game, and so a lot of people were hyped about it. Now, Todd and the team have shown us 45 minutes of gameplay footage and developer interviews, and I kept thinking it was going to be over, but it just kept going. Now the conversation's being dominated by, wow, look how much polish you can get done in just a year. The faces look better, the environments look better, the gameplay is much smoother this time around. And best of all, Bethesda seems really confident in this game. I mean, to come out and show this much footage, it's way more than we saw from Fallout 4. Starfield has that same kind of energy, and that's what gets me so excited. So it's time to dive into this gameplay and look at why Starfield is already being called one of the video games of all time. The gameplay starts on this planet, and it shows us a nice little slice of what this gameplay loop is going to look like in Starfield. And shocker, it's very similar to other Bethesda games. You'll land somewhere, explore around, stumble upon something interesting, you'll get some materials, you'll do a mission, a quest, whatever you want to do, then hop back on your ship and continue exploring. I remember last year we didn't get to see this loop in action. We kind of just guessed what it was going to look like based on Bethesda's games, and it does seem like that's pretty accurate. Think Skyrim, but substitute your horse for a ship, and think, you know, an interesting location, a cave, something like that that would catch your eye, but replace that with a planet. That gameplay loop is very similar, but the scale and size of it is just way more than we had before. But what immediately stuck out to me was the density of this first planet they showed. There's plants and vegetation everywhere. I was a little worried with how barren everything looked in the previous gameplay. This sort of walkthrough kind of put me at ease, and it also showed me that they spent a lot of time on the combat. I mean, it looks so much better, and just general performance. Guns look so much snappier and reactive, and it's not just in this scene, it's in all of the combat scenes that they showed. I mean, there's probably alone like 5 straight minutes of combat gameplay across this entire showcase. They really did show us a ton. Now, a quick note on performance. I did watch an interview where Todd Howard did confirm that this game's going to run at 30 FPS on Xbox Series X. Now, I will say that's probably a bummer for some people. Personally, I was going to play this on PC regardless, so it doesn't personally affect me, but I do realize, like, yeah, that's probably a bit of a bummer for some people who have the next-gen hardware and are expecting something better. However, I think the explanation they gave made a lot of sense. I mean, this is a very huge and very detailed world that they didn't want to sacrifice certain systems just to pump up the frame rate. Now, obviously, the jury's still out on this stuff, how the game is going to run. We're not going to know for sure until it actually does come out, and especially on the bugs side of things. Now, they have had this extra time to polish, so that makes me hopeful, but Bethesda has a reputation for a reason, so I'm just gonna kind of wait and see on that. Moving on, we have some space gameplay of our character actually getting out of the chair and walking around the ship while you're in space. I know there was some question about that, but here we see that's absolutely possible. You can go talk to your crew, look at the star map, and later on they show us, like, when you're actually building your ship, you can place crafting, you know, tables and all of that stuff. In order to access that, yeah, you're gonna have to walk around your ship. And so I really like the idea of that, and it just gives me massive Mass Effect vibes, which is great for me. I love Mass Effect. But there's so much you can do in space. It's almost like this extra layer of gameplay that I think we haven't really had in a Bethesda game that expands it further. You'll see other ships out in space, so you can communicate with them, you can hail them, you can threaten them, you can actually board them and steal the ship and keep it for yourself. But you can also just blast it out of space and then collect the materials. In terms of actually flying from space onto a planet, I think they already confirmed last year that that's not possible. Instead, you're going to choose the planet, then you can zoom in, find a point of interest to land, or select your own custom place and you can land anywhere on any planet. But you won't be able to pilot your ship from orbit to surface and like be in control. You're gonna pick a landing spot and then you'll have a little cutscene that I think we've seen multiple times, and then you'll be on the surface. Personally, I see this as a trade-off. There's so many other things we're gonna be able to do, like land on space stations and walk around and interact with different NPCs in ways that you really can't do in other space games. I did go back to No Man's Sky and play that. I did check out Star Citizen and played that for a couple hours. The reality is the scale and the variability of Starfield as an RPG, as a Bethesda game, is just so much different than what we're dealing with in these other games. And so just the possibilities get me really excited. For example, Todd said this dynamic event happened to him the other day. He was playing Starfield, he got on a planet, he was exploring around, then a ship landed and attacked him. They were raiders or pirates, whatever. He decided to fight back, and that involved getting on this ship that just landed there. He was fighting, and then all of a sudden that ship took off and he went up into space. That's not something that I've ever experienced in any other space game, and that was a random event, not something that was pre-scripted. And you know, that's sort of the magic of a Bethesda game, the things that you feel like you're discovering for yourself that seem like, I didn't know that could happen, wow, that just happened. So needless to say, I'm really excited to experience something like that for myself. Something else that we got a pretty good look at is sort of the society and the rules of a civilization and how you sort of fit into that in Starfield. Now, there's different regions of space with different rules. So you're going to have UC space, which is the most sort of civilized, what we might call like a traditional, form of government, and there's laws and so on and so forth. There's the Free Star space, which is a lot more like bounty hunter-ish, and anything goes. There's going to be outlaws, but there's places outside of either of those space where literally anything goes. It's going to be hostile. It's going to be whatever happens. We get a glimpse of how this stuff works when we go to New Atlantis, which is in UC space. So before you're able to land here, you have ships come up and scan you to make sure that you're not smuggling anything, that you don't have contraband. In this demo, there is no contraband, but my mind immediately went to, what if there was? Like, would we have to hightail it out of there? Would we have a fine? Like, what does it look like when you get arrested and go to jail? I mean, we know stuff like that happens in previous Bethesda games, so it's just, it sort of gets my mind spinning at the possibilities. If I have contraband, can I go to somewhere in the Free Star Collective space and sell that, or do I need to go beyond the reaches of any formal space? Anyways, we get really in-depth look at all of the cities in this game, and man, if you thought like Fallout and Skyrim had huge, impressive cities, it feels like Starfield goes so much further. These are dense, they have multiple levels, tons of different factions to interact with, and they talk about focusing on the little stories, stumbling upon something someone's saying, and you're able to sort of interact with those people and learn more about what's going on. So much about what makes Bethesda games special to me is the illusion that everything's happening around me without me being there. It's like this world exists not because I'm there, but just because it's a world. It's a living, breathing place. And so gosh, I'm so excited to get lost in all of these different cities. Outside of New Atlantis, which looks fantastic to me, Aquila City looks so cool. It's like that classic outlaw bounty hunter sort of space western environment. And then Neon looks like all kinds of debauchery. I mean, we even saw like a murder scene in that city, almost like a cyberpunk within another video game. Which brings me to the point that, and this is something that Todd also said in another interview, this feels like a lot of different games in one. It's not just a space game, it's multiple in its approach. It's delivering a space fantasy, but also that Western feel, that outlaw feel, that explorer feel. And so if it can nail that, I just think there's so much potential for this game. Another big standout for me is a huge improvement in faces. I mean, it really does look so much better than the gameplay we saw last year. And I also think there is a tendency to look at these faces and think, wow, this could look better. And I do agree with that, but at the same time, I think you have to recognize it for the fact that this is a huge world with thousands of planets. You're going to see a lot of faces. I'm actually kind of over games having to deliver hyper-realistic faces because it never looks quite right. It's always kind of that uncanny valley issue. So as long as these look expressive and realistic enough to where I'm like, yeah, obviously it's a human being and it is up to par with current technology, then I don't have a problem with it. I think this looks great. Speaking of faces, we get a look at the character creator, which looks fine to me. I'm not someone who's going to spend a lot of time in the character creator, to be honest, but it is sort of fun role-playing, of course, and the fact that we don't have a voice protagonist just makes this even better because they went into how your background affects dialogue. So if you decide that you're a chef, you'll hear some chef dialogue from people randomly, and it'll come in handy in certain quests where you don't expect it to. We had that stuff in Fallout 4, but it was limited by the voiced protagonist because we would be fit into this box of, this is the recorded dialogue. this needs to be the response. So in my eyes, that limited both the possibilities and your own headcanon, what you're able to, put into the game as your role-playing character. We're not chained down by that voice protagonist, limiter. So we're going to have so much unique dialogue. And speaking of dialogue, I don't know if you guys noticed this, there's a little persuasion system with little bars at the bottom of some of these dialogue cutscenes. And they haven't gone in depth with that before, but I believe it's been mentioned in previous interviews. It's a little mini game, and there's going to be some resource of persuasion checks. I'm really excited to see that further in action. Something else they showed with character creation is traits, and that is just something that's borrowed from Fallout New Vegas and the Outer Worlds. Some things are positives, some things are negatives. You have some trade-offs. The one that really caught my eye is Wanted. In exchange for getting a little bit more damage when you're low health, you're going to be hunted by bounty hunters who are just going to come after you randomly. That sounds so fun to me. I mean, it's just a certain kind of chaos that I think is very welcome in a Bethesda game. Next up, the skill system looks really solid to me, and I think it strikes a nice balance between Fallout and Skyrim. Specifically, the fact that how you play influences your skills, and the skills you choose influence how you play. For example, if I want to be good against robots, I'll take the skill that makes me good against robots, but then I'm going to have to complete challenges to unlock the next rank of that specific skill. So I still choose a direction that I want to go in. So you get that pre-planning sort of RPG pen and paper, like planning out how your build is going to be, but then you actually have to execute it by going out, completing those actions to feel like you're actually developing that skill. And I did go through and look. It looks like there's around 82 skills and there's 4 ranks per skill. So guys, that means we're gonna be at least level 328 in order to max every skill out. We don't know if that's possible. We don't know if there's a level cap, but judging from Bethesda's previous games, there shouldn't be a level cap, and it should absolutely be possible to get all of these. From what I've seen of these skills, this just reminds me of other Bethesda games. Lots of granularity, some ultra-specific things that are sort of fun ways to play around with the game, like controlling aliens, for example, is one of them that they showed. And then at the top of the trees, you're going to have some very basic stuff that's going to help everyone, like your boost pack. I'm going to be using that and just boosting around everywhere in combat because it just looks so fun. They spent a huge chunk of this talking about ship customization and building outposts, and it's insane the amount of detail here. I mean, they took settlement crafting from Fallout 4 and then tailored it specifically for ships. You're gonna live in your ships, you're gonna craft in your ships, you're gonna have your crew in ships. It just looks so deep. And I don't think I'm gonna spend that much time using these systems, but maybe this will convert me. I didn't love settlement crafting and building in Fallout 4, just wasn't what I wanted to spend my time doing. But I mean, the fact that you can make your ship look like an animal or a mech, I mean, look how stupid / hilarious this thing looks. Our crew are not just bodies that are on our ship. They have specific skills and things they're good at. So it's kind of like assigning settlers to certain jobs in Fallout 4, but even more specific. And you can hire crew that are not just companions that can follow you around. If you need, an extra person on a gun or something, you can find that person, hire them, and then you're good to go. It's just, again, it reminds me of Mass Effect, but with an extra layer, and that's so exciting to me. They also showed off ship combat, which follows a power system, which if you've played any game with space combat at all, or even like a space management sim game like FTL, you've heard of this before. You're just shifting power between different systems based on the situation. And hey, if that's a tried and true formula that works for those kinds of games, then that works for me. In terms of just exploring in space, we're going to be able to scan planets for resources. Again, Mass Effect, that's a huge comparison right there. They talk about how they have this procedural approach, and then they go in and put the handcrafted detail on each of these planets. Once again, the number, over 1,000 planets we're going to be able to go and check out. I'm glad they sort of talked about this because that was another question last year. There's that many planets, but how many of them are going to feel lived in and handcrafted and not just random planet XYZ? Go back and do some research on how Fallout and Skyrim and Morrowind and all of these Oblivion games were made. They all started with procedural generation, and then they went back in with the handcrafted details. So that just doesn't bother me. Very similar to a lot of space games we've already played out there, this game is going to have a scanner, and that's how you're going to interact with the environment and discover new locations, find out where there's resources to mine, learn more about the creatures. And It really feels like they're also setting this up very well for a pacifist playthrough. If you want to just be that explorer that embarks and grabs a bunch of information, there's ecological challenges that will reward you. That's not how I'm going to be playing, I can tell you that. I'm going to be blasting things. You know, people will die, creatures will die, but at least you can do that, and it's fun to know that that's possible. But let's circle back again to settlements. You can build settlements in this game just like Fallout, but I'm assuming with even more detail, because they talk about the fact that you can put these outposts almost anywhere on any planet. It's not a set location like we had before. You can do things like put your crew there to perform specific tasks, extract resources from the environment. So say you need a steady supply of iron for something specific, find the iron, put down an outpost, put an extractor there, and you've got that. I think the overall pitch for this game is take all these systems we've done before and just do more. Add more depth, more breadth, and more depth. The last few things I want to mention, zero-G combat looks fantastic. I remember reading some specific things about that, worries that it wouldn't be in the game. No, it's totally there, and it's going to be a prevalent thing, and it's realistic. Ballistic weapons push you back. Just a few things to consider that are on the, realism side, but still arcadey and fun. But the totally unrealistic thing is this space magic move that we see at the very end, and all the speculation is this is the Skyrim, shout of this game, or the VATS of Fallout. Now, if I had to guess, this is probably the main story. You find some artifacts out in the world, you're trying to discover the origin of humanity, why everything is here, so on and so forth, and maybe you get some powers from it. All I can say is sign me up. Before we go, I want to leave you guys with some closing thoughts just above the treetops on Starfield in general. I love the vision and the concept for the game. I love the color palette. I love the NASA punk sort of art style that they went with. And I love that what excites me about this game is usually not what excites me about a lot of video games these days. It's the vastness. This thing is massive. The reason I'm not excited by that is there's too many empty, bland, open world video games. Todd, I think, mentioned this in one of the interviews. At every single point possible, they want to say yes to the player on the possibilities of what you can do. And that is just what makes all the difference in the world, I think, in an open world game. When you are sort of confined by how developers want you to play a certain game in a very specific play style, it sort of robs you of that player-led experience. And that's what Bethesda, in my eyes, is so good at. Taking the reins off, just giving you the wheel and letting you drive your own experience. And that's what I see from Starfield. They've said that they've learned from Skyrim that they need to build a game to last. People are still playing Skyrim today. Heck, I pull up Skyrim every now and then because of how good it is still. It's kind of hard to expect another lightning in the bottle moment like Skyrim, but Starfield looks like it very well could be that game, and I'm just so excited. So that is it for me. I'd love to hear what you guys think about the Starfield gameplay, all that 45 minutes of, dense, juicy info. There's just so much to take in. I didn't even cover all of it in this video. So would love to hear what you guys are thinking about the game now. And of course, I will be covering Starfield. If more gameplay drops, something that excites me happens, I will make another video. And of course, I'll be playing the game when it comes out in September. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, remember to hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more videos like this, and hit the bell so you don't miss my next one. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.